do any kind of science communication at all, I try to help post it and whatever they're doing. So, all right, we should be live. Hey everyone, Fraser here. Once again, it's time for Open Space, where we're going to be doing a live conversation with sometimes just me, sometimes a special guest. This week I've got a very special guest, astronaut Ron Garan. Ron, thanks so much for taking the time to chat with us today.
Hey, Fraser, it's my pleasure. Thanks for the invitation.
Now you've got. So, can you give people like your brief history? I mean, you got a bunch of great, amazing things that you've done, but why don't you let people know who you are?
Well, let's see. Where to start?
Fighter jets, astronaut, writer.
Yeah, I'll tell you why I'm laughing later when we start talking about the book. But yeah, I'm a former NASA astronaut. I went the traditional route, if you will, to NASA. I was a military fighter pilot, became a test pilot, and was selected from the cadre of test pilots. I was in the class of 2000. My first mission with NASA was not in space. It was on the bottom of the ocean in Aquarius. I did a 3-week mission on Nemo, which is, Aquarius is the world's only undersea laboratory. And that was an amazing experience. It gave me my first taste of the awe and wonder of our planet from a really unique perspective. It was a lunar mission or a simulated lunar mission, but we were developing lunar surface exploration techniques. We did a lot of telemedicine. We had a surgical robot on board, and we did telerobotic surgery, and a lot of, we basically simulated that we were on a moon base,
Yeah.
and how are we gonna explore the surface. I flew my first flight in 2008. I was on Space Shuttle Discovery for STS-124. We brought up and installed the Japanese laboratory at the space station, and I did 3 EVAs, 3 spacewalks on that mission. And then I flew again in 2011 after launching from Kazakhstan, from Baikonur, in a Soyuz spacecraft for a 5.5-month mission on Expedition 27 and 28.
And you are no longer an astronaut, right? As you said, you're no longer working as an astronaut. You are sort of the follow-on career. So what comes after being an astronaut?
I left NASA in 2013, and I left with a call to action. I really felt an obligation, a responsibility to share the perspective that I've been given of our planet from the vantage point of space, because I think it's a really compelling perspective, a perspective that can lead to profound problem solving, to unity of our species, to unity of the planet. And so everything I've done since leaving NASA has been to either literally or figuratively bring people up to that perspective. I wrote the book, The Orbital Perspective. I have 2 more books coming out. I have a podcast that's coming out. I'm working on a documentary film. I started painting and trying
Yeah.
to
Well, and you're not alone in that. I mean, every astronaut who I've had the honor of talking to has expressed some version of that there's something about being in space that changes you profoundly about the way you perceive the planet and your role in it. So can you talk a bit about that, about like what that was like for you, and I guess how that has impacted how you're leading your life now?
Sure. I mean, before I do, though, the main tenet of the book, The Orbital Perspective, is that you don't have to be in orbit to have the orbital perspective, right? So
But it helps.
but in my last book, I included many stories of people who had never been to space who have this perspective of our planet. But I think, when I first got back, people would ask me, maybe not on my first mission, on my second mission, a lot of people would ask me, what has anything changed in me? And I used to say, no, I don't think really anything changed. Any beliefs, philosophies that I had before I launched, I think were just amplified, confirmed maybe. But I think after having a number of years to process this, I think the main thing that changed in me was my definition of the word home. And I think my definition of the word home has expanded to include the planet. And the beauty of that is that broadening your definition of the word home does not come with it a requirement to forget where you came from, your national, ethnic, cultural identities, political identities. It simply means seeing those things in the context of the bigger picture, in the bigger ecosystem, if you will.
And so you are, we'll get right to it. You're working on a new book.
Yep.
And this is like this is your third book?
So, well, I don't know. It depends on which. I have two that are coming out. I have a children's book called Railroad to the Moon,
Yep.
which is about a little girl who somehow gets to go to the moon. And I won't give that away how she gets there. But she ends up becoming the mayor of Armstrong City on the moon in the year 2068, on the 100th anniversary of Apollo 8. And so that's a book that's done, but it's not in publication yet. We're still working on that. But the other book is called Floating in Darkness.
Yeah.
And it is more or less a sequel to The Orbital Perspective. The Orbital Perspective really tackled the need for planetary collaboration and it did that from the vantage point of space, of trying to zoom out to see the big picture. But as much as The Orbital Perspective dealt with outer space, Floating in Darkness has two sides of the coin. It's not just outer space, it's inner space as well. So really dives into some deep subjects, religion, spirituality, science, and how those all intersect and how they're not mutually exclusive.
So I want to, normally I kind of hog the guest's time, but and the people who are watching, I want to encourage you. I'm going to relinquish a lot of control today and pass a lot of your questions over to Ron, so we can sort of learn more about what it's like to be an astronaut, especially some of these themes. But the book right now is still you're still writing it. According to the publisher, you're what, 75% through at this point?
Yeah. Maybe it's a little more than that. I'm starting to wrap it up, and I'm really, really excited about how it's coming out. And The Orbital Perspective, I really enjoy having written the Orbital Perspective. I'm proud of the book. I'm proud of the message, but it wasn't actually fun to write the book.
Yeah, it's funny. It's that idea, right? Like, you write one book, and that teaches you to never write another book. Or you're willing to go through that process again, but it's never easy, but it's often worthwhile.
No, but writing Floating in Darkness has been a joy. I've been writing it for about 3 years now. And what I did with The Orbital Perspective is I went the traditional route. I found, I had a literary agent. We pitched the idea for the book to a number of publishers. We found a publisher that was willing to take on the project, and I had deadlines, and I would I'd go to the Lunar Planetary Institute for like 6 hours or 8 hours a day and write. What I did with this book is I'm not just with Floating in Darkness. I'm not just launching a book. I want to launch a movement of people who are want to get away from the divisive, us versus them, two-dimensional world that we've somehow created, especially in recent months and years, and embrace a platform of awe and wonder, embrace a platform of unity, and to realize that we're not going to overcome the challenges that we face if we don't do it together. And so, with that book, I purposely did not get a publisher. I wrote when I felt inspired to write, and what I'm doing right now is I launched a crowdfunding campaign on publishizer.com, and the purpose of that is not to raise money for the book. The purpose of that is to build a community, to build a groundswell of support around the message of the unifying messages of the book, and to build this momentum so that it gets picked up by a major publisher. I really would like a major publisher to pick this up, because I want a publisher that's going to be willing to dedicate the resources necessary for the marketing and the promotion of the book, so that we get it out to the widest audience possible. And I think one of the obligations I feel is that through the way I'm writing this book, it's going to reach across the political spectrum, national spectrum. It's going to reach everybody. And so, normally when I talk, when I do, I'm preaching to the choir. I'm preaching to folks who already understand, about the bigger picture. But we have a really unique opportunity now to reach folks that in a lot of cases other people would have given up on a long time ago. And we have this tremendous opportunity, and I want to make sure that we make the most of it.
It's a funny thing. Like, I think the internet allowed us as human beings to interact in this kind of in this unfettered way that has been incredible. I mean, here we are. I'm on Vancouver Island. I have no idea where you're located. Somewhere in the U.S.
Neither do I.
Yeah, exactly. You don't know. Maybe in space, maybe on Earth.
No, I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Oh, there you go. And we're chatting, and we organize the whole thing. So I mean, the chance to be able to reach out and connect with other human beings is unprecedented, and for good, but also but also in sort of this time of like hot takes and even purposeful sort of divisions that are being sowed around. It's a chance for people to kind of get angry at each other, but it feels to me like this is more like it's our first interaction with some new way. It's like the first time the body sees a new virus and it has this kind of response, but it's building up an immune system. And I think that immune system is that we're going to learn to get along, and we're going to learn to be polite, and then we're going to learn to try to sort of think about people's, expect that people are better than our first instinct, and to try and come at it from that perspective. And that's, it's often time and time again, that's the theme on my channel is, I never get mad. I never get into big arguments. I'm always filled with awe and inspiration for what we're doing in space. And I think that that's important. I think, and hopefully the people who like that, who don't want to be around a big fight, can kind of come together and just share in that awe, and by all means have disagreements, but you don't have to be nasty about it. And I, personally, I find it, maybe it's because I'm a Canadian, and I'm just like, I have no interest whatsoever in any of those fights and hot takes and any of that. So that all sounds wonderful.
It's interesting that you put it in those terms, because, I talked about building a movement. I talked about building community, and really another way to say that is what I'm asking people to be is, white blood cells in a growing immune response to heal our world.
Right? And I think that's it.
That is the message of the book, is to be a part of the solution, to be a part of the immune response, to heal our planet, because our planet is in dire straits.
Yeah, I mean, and that's not the only thing. So it would be interesting, whether there'll be some kind of technology solution that assists us in recognizing that someone is attempting to rile us up, or whether we just have practice to kind of just not rise to the occasion. I really think there is sort of a next level of conversation. Let's take advantage of all the connectivity, but then not be sort of as aggressive in each other's faces, and maybe actually come together and solve some problems. So like I said, I hope you've all had a chance to think about a bunch of questions that you want to ask Ron. Again, you've got an astronaut here. This is your chance. So this question comes from Yamagashi-san. How do astronauts deal with itches in spacesuits?
Oh yeah, that's well, the only thing that you can scratch an itch on your nose.
Yeah.
There's a little pad inside your helmet. It's to help you Valsalva, to clear your ears for pressure changes. And you can maybe lean over and scratch your nose on that. That's about it. Other than that, you're out of luck. You just got to live with it.
And so, I mean, you did spacewalks where you can be outside for hours, like 8 hours at a time. And if there's any part of your body that's not sort of up to par, then you just got to deal with it while you're out in the middle of space.
That's right. You gotta suck it up.
So Arjun asks, if SpaceX had a call for astronauts to go to Mars, would you go? So now that you're a retired astronaut, are you still a freelancer? Would you still?
I would go to Mars on a round trip.
Yes.
I wouldn't go on a one-way trip to Mars. So
what do you think about that? Because like Earth is excellent. Earth is really a fantastic place. So
my favorite planet.
Yeah. What is, how do you sort of put that in perspective? Because there's a lot of people that I think would go to Mars, and they'd go there for forever if they could, or so they think they would. Do they understand what it will be like?
Well, I mean, I can't speak for other people, but I know that if I was going there on a one-way trip, it might be exciting for a few weeks. It might be pretty cool, and then eventually, I would say to myself, what am I going to do here? I can't even go outside without wearing a spacesuit,
Yeah.
it's. I mean, it's going to be exciting to explore. It's going to be exciting to hopefully, search for signs of ancient life on Mars, and I don't mean to lessen the impact and the importance of that. But when explorers set out and explored new worlds on Earth, they lived off the land when they got there. It's going to be very difficult to do that on Mars. I'm not saying we can't do that, but it's going to be very challenging, and it's going to be the folks who do that are going to face a lot of hardships. And um, I think I would love to go and I'd love to participate that, but I love this planet too much. It's too beautiful. I've gotten to fall in love with our planet, and I wouldn't want to leave it permanently.
Yeah. Um, same with the moon. If you got the call to go up there and do one of those
Oh, I have
expeditions to the moon.
I'd go there even faster than the. I've been a proponent. Actually, Universe Today published an article of mine. It must be at least 10 years ago or
Yeah.
more, on why we need to go back to the moon. And this was back when we had a program to go to Mars, and why it was important to go to the moon first, and to establish a long term transportation infrastructure between the Earth and our nearest neighbor, and to basically create a gateway to the rest of the solar system by doing that. I think it's really important to go to Mars. I think we need to do that. Um, but I think the first step on the journey to Mars should be a permanent human presence on the moon.
Yeah. It's I mean, I can sort of see in the midterm, like something like what we do with Antarctica, where there is a base that's permanently staffed. The people are there. They're doing a bunch of really interesting research, but at the same time, it's such a hostile environment, and so you're having to send constant supplies.
Right.
And the lessons that are learned there will help us with anything else that we want to do out there in space. Do you find that sort of what's happening with SpaceX has had a real impact on sort of people's enthusiasm for space? Do you find, when you do a speaking gig or something like that, do you find people's attitudes are kind of changing? Because I'll tell you what I'm experiencing, which is that people seem a little more hopeful now, that they're starting to see some of the promises of science fiction starting to come together with reusable rockets and whatever's happening with the Starship, and that it is pressuring other groups as well to maybe catch up and speed up and change their approach.
Yeah, I mean, I think SpaceX is doing an incredible job technically, but it also is doing, I think, a really amazing job from a promotional point of view. Right? I mean, it really, it's a great show, right? I mean, when those boosters come back and land in formation, when you launch a sports car to space, and you have these incredible shots of Starman there driving his. I mean, that people are going to identify with that, right? And I think it's more than well, the sports car is more than a stunt. I think it captures the imagination of folks, and SpaceX and other companies besides SpaceX are delivering on the promises that they're making, and I think we're on the verge of some really exciting things in commercial spaceflight.
Yeah, I mean, we're recording this right now before Starship has actually done its 20K hop, before it's actually gone to orbit and even been able to demonstrate that it can actually re-enter with this stainless steel system. But if it does, and it is a fully reusable rocket, everything kind of changes then. I mean, what makes sense to launch into space changes. It's a dramatic difference. Do you is there, in your experience, is there anyone within NASA, within some of the more established groups, starting to really kind of think about what would be possible with some of these different launch systems?
Yeah, of course. I think there's a lot of people thinking about that, and I think there's a lot of these companies that are, really pushing the limits of what we think is possible. And I know it sounds cliche, but thinking outside of the box, right?
Yeah.
I mean, and coming up with something new. Again, going back to the boosters landing in formation together, I would have never,
Yeah.
I would have never thought that was. I would think it was possible. I wouldn't have thought it was a feasible thing to do up until recently. But when
And
you
it
see it,
probably wasn't. I mean, you
yeah,
needed computers that could handle a powered, descent like that.
sure.
So Christopher Trispec asks, was it scarier going up to space or coming down from space?
Well, they're both scary.
Yeah.
um, yeah, I don't, it's interesting. They're both scary, but I wasn't scared. I mean, you're in an intense environment. So I had 2 launches on 2 different vehicles. They were vastly different from each other. My launch on Space Shuttle Discovery, you're in this big, massive vehicle that's, shaking violently. And, it was my first space flight. I had a lot of responsibilities, a lot of things that we as a crew could have done wrong that, would end our mission in a spectacular way, and also end our lives in a spectacular way. So, there was an intense amount of concentration on that. The Soyuz was my second flight. I knew sort of what to expect. I didn't have a lot of responsibilities. I had a window right next to my head. The Soyuz is not a big, massive vehicle. It almost feels like you're wearing the rocket on your back. And the biggest surprise for me on the Soyuz launch was how much fun it was. I was not expecting to have fun. It's funny, we launched on the 50th anniversary of Yuri Gagarin's flight from the same pad that he launched from. And as we lift off, my Soyuz commander, Sasha Samokoteyev, is making this, speech in Russian, in the words of Yuri Gagarin, "Поехали, we're off," and he's saying all this stuff. But when you listen to the tape, the recording of it, in the background, you hear "woohoo."
That's you.
That's me. And that was totally involuntary, spontaneous. I was like, people said, it's not like the shuttle. When the shuttle lifts off, you feel like you just got released from a slingshot. I mean, I know it looks slow on TV, but you are jumping off that pad, and there's no doubt in anybody's mind that you're going somewhere, and you're going somewhere fast. And I was told by people who flew on the Soyuz that it's a lot, you're not even going to really know that you've lifted off. And I totally disagree with that. There was no doubt in my mind that we had just lifted off. And it was, the staging was incredible. If you watch the movie Apollo 13, they have the scene when they're launching it and they stage, and all 3 of the astronauts get thrown forward into the instrument panel, and then the engines kick in and they all get thrown back on their seat. That's exactly that.
Oh,
and
wow.
I started laughing because I'm thinking to myself, yeah, Ron Howard got it right in Apollo 13. So
Yeah.
that was going to space. Coming back from space, we coming back on Space Shuttle Discovery, it wasn't that long after Columbia. So there's always in the back of your mind, you're always, cognizant that, something can go wrong. But it's for the most part a benign reentry, right? You could see out the window all the plasma going by, and you realize that, you don't want to be right outside that window. But it's pretty much, a smooth trip back. I remember when I was getting ready to come back on the Soyuz, I was talking to Scott Kelly, and he said, "Hey, the only way I could describe it, it's like going over Niagara Falls in a barrel that's on fire," and that's exactly the way it is. But it's followed by a high-speed crash at the end. So we got
Right.
everything. It was pretty violent. It was about as violent as it gets. I remember one point during the thing when the parachute when the drogue chutes open and you get thrown all over the place. It's like 3 guys on the end of a towel being whipped in every different direction. I remember Andrei Voroshenko over in the left seat yells out in Russian, "It's just like an American amusement park ride," but it was more violent than any amusement park ride I've ever been on. And there was periodically times when all 3 of us started laughing, and we're laughing because we can't believe that we're still alive after what we just went through.
After what you just went through. Yeah. So, I mean, just to break that down for people, right? Like, as I mean, as you said, with the space shuttle, it re-enters fairly smoothly and is able to slow down and then acts like a brick with wings until it can land in Cape Canaveral. But the process of the Soyuz, right? Every part of it is sort of a shock to the system,
Yeah.
and that landing where it fires as retro thrusters at the last second and then slams into the ground.
Yeah, they call them soft landing jets, but I think what they actually are is they're smoke screens, so you can't see how hard we actually hit. Because I think different. It depends on the winds and the orientation of the capsule, and it depends on a lot of stuff of how hard you hit. But nothing surprised me coming back on the Soyuz. Everything was as violent as it was. It was pretty much what I expected, except for the landing. I couldn't not believe how hard we hit, and we end up bouncing and rolling over. And the other thing people told me is you're going to, because of your vestibular system being messed up, you're going to feel like you're rolling over, like you're tumbling. And I felt that right away. As soon as we hit the ground, I felt like we're tumbling. But then I saw debris flying in every different direction, and I realized that we are tumbling. I mean, it was like one of those, rollover crash. We were like crash test dummies in the rollover test. But it's a great system. Obviously we all survived, and
Yeah.
We came back safely. It was just a lot of excitement along the way.
Arjone asks, we have lots of robots on Mars, but how much more science could astronauts do in the same amount of time, or if they work together with the robots?
Yeah, I think what we found, and actually what we did on my undersea mission on Nemo 9, was we did a lot of combined human robotic exploration. That, when we were, again, the mission was to practice lunar surface exploration procedures. And so we had all kinds of robotic helpers, if you will. And, traditionally we've had human explorers and robotic explorers. And really the only time we've come together are things like, robotic arms. But I think what we'll find is that there's a benefit to having robotic explorers, and there's a benefit to having human explorers. And when you put those two together, it's really a powerful team. And with the increase in AI and everything else, I think we're gonna see that more and more.
Yeah, I mean, one of the really interesting ideas for even something like, say, the Lunar Gateway is you could teleoperate rovers down on the surface of the moon with essentially no lag, and so it's like you're
Right.
driving a remote control buggy around the surface of the moon as fast as you want and with as much responsiveness as you need, and
Yeah.
you can get a lot more science done with that kind of a situation, but not necessarily putting yourself at risk.
Yeah.
Okay, so on the Weekly Space Hangout just a couple of days ago, one of the co-hosts sort of did a deep dive on space toilets and talked about how every Soyuz has a space toilet, and the space shuttle has a space toilet, and the International Space Station has its space toilet. So, as someone who has possibly sampled all of them, which one is the least worst?
Wow, we're 28 minutes into the interview, and it's taking you 28 minutes not to get to the
Space
toilet.
toilets, I know. But just you just
I,
tell
I, you know, I think the Russian solution is a very simple solution, and it's very robust. And I think when it comes to toilets, you don't want things to break, and so the more robust you can build it, and the more you can over-engineer it, and put all kinds of factors in there to keep it working. It's a really bad day when the toilet breaks, but sometimes it does. When on STS 124, when we opened up the hatch, Mark Kelly, he was the commander of 124, said, "Hey, any of you guys looking for a plumber?" Because their toilet was broken, and we were bringing up. They were really happy to see us because we were bringing up a part to fix the toilet. So.
Yeah. Now, I read Scott Kelly's book, and you were on at the same time as he was, right? Up in the station?
No, I was actually his backup for his first mission.
Okay. Right.
And then I flew 6 months after his first mission, and I wasn't involved in the 1 year mission.
Okay. One of the things that he really went on quite a lot about was how much the quality of the atmosphere affected his ability to do his
Right.
mission.
Yeah, CO2. Yeah.
With the CO2, yeah. And like he knew right away, he could just feel it, whether the CO2
Yep.
was sort of up. So, did you find that was a real impact on you as well?
Oh yeah, of course. And where you'd feel it is mostly when we're doing press conferences. Especially, when the shuttle was up there, you could have 13 people in one little space, and all of them are exhaling, and so and you're basically building this big giant cloud of CO2 right around your heads, and you'd start an interview, and about 15, 20 minutes into it, you're starting to get headaches because you're like, okay, we're building our own little CO2 cloud here. So yeah, I mean, it's definitely a factor, and it definitely affects productivity.
Yeah, I could just imagine. And you've got, like, I don't think people really understand how busy your day is, how well scheduled everything you have to do is, and you're having to be able to think at the same time that you do all this, and so it's
Right.
really hard.
Yeah, they keep you busy.
Yeah. How much free time would you get?
Um, so during the normal work week, not much. We'd get like a day and a half off on the weekends, but you're really, when you have time off, a lot of it depends on how busy. It goes in cycles, right? You get busy, and then it might slow down a little bit again. But if you're in a busy time, your time off is used catching up, right, or getting ahead, uh, and trying to plan for next week. So, but there was always time to take a moment and look out the window whenever I needed it.
Yeah, and I
So
think one of my favorite pictures of you is looking out the cupola window with your camera, just watching the Earth go by. I've you know, what was it like to do photography from the space station?
yeah, it's interesting. I was a big videographer. I really enjoyed video, and I didn't expect that I would be doing a lot of still photography when up there. I ended up taking 25,000
Yeah,
pictures. And so, especially, during my mission was really the first time we started doing the time lapse. I know Don Pettit did it, before. I think he's the only one that really did time lapse, but he didn't have the cameras that we had. And so I'll never forget the first time I set up a time lapse, and I took a picture of a hurricane or the auroras. I can't remember exactly what it was, and how easy it was to put that together with the software that we had up there. And I just pulled everybody together and just said, "Hey, look at this! Look at this video I just made with time lapse. We need to start doing this. This is
yeah,
this is incredible." And obviously, it's taken off since then, and it's produced some incredible perspective of our planet. And so, I really enjoyed still photography up there. I got really lucky occasionally. I got some incredible shot. I got a shot of a meteor coming, going below us,
right.
and the Perseus meteor shower. Just some beautiful shots of auroras, and then obviously sunsets and sunrises are always spectacular as well.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that you're just sort of getting shots of the ball that's below you, but the light changes, the
Yep.
shadows, the
Yep.
the what the weather is doing currently, and how the sunlight is coming through the water, and features like that. Yeah, it's amazing how much of an artistic perspective the astronauts were bringing to the photography. And I think you're exactly right. You were one of the first who had like the right gear. I know Don is a really accomplished photographer, and
Right.
you had a lot of much better gear, better telephoto lenses to be able to take some of these
Yeah, and
photographs.
low light. We had the low light cameras too
Yeah.
that he didn't have on his earlier missions. He's had it since, and done spectacular things. But yeah, with the right gear, you're going to get some great shots.
Yeah. Um, do you sort of, based on that experience, do you think did you have some recommendations you were able to provide for future astronauts in terms of either photography or other gear that would have be even better up there?
Well, you're kind of stuck with the gear that's up there, but yeah, I mean, we all exchange notes and exchange strategies, and one of my goals was to not just capture the beauty of the scene, but also the emotion of it. And that back in the day, when an astronaut photography first started out, it was all technical, right? It was all to document different things, and it was most of it was straight nadir, looking down at the earth. And so if when we're taking all of the pictures are taken in our spare time, unless we have a specific thing that we're supposed to photograph that's on the schedule. But 99% of all the astronaut photography is in the spare time, and so a lot of the astronauts really want to take an artistic look at it. And I know Paolo Nespoli was a crewmate of mine, and he really took a lot of pictures, a lot of beautiful pictures, and there's a lot of others who really looked at it from an artistic point of view.
Arjun asks, how long do you think it'll take for normal people to be needed in space as opposed to super smart specialists?
Okay, yeah. I didn't know how to take that because I consider myself fairly normal.
Yeah, I think you're a super smart specialist, but
Um, needed in space. Yeah, I mean, we are, I think, on the verge of a whole economy in space. I'd like to see thousands of people living on the moon. I think the benefits to the Earth of having those folks on the moon are going to be tremendous. And I think there's different skill sets that are going to be needed. And I hope in the next 10 to 20 years that all comes to fruition.
yeah. How do you feel about sort of these competing visions that Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos are laying out there for sort of humankind's purpose? With Musk really focusing on let's go to Mars and let's use that as a backup plan for humanity, and Jeff Bezos is a lot more about like let's get the pollution, let's get our manufacturing and resource acquisition off Earth and out into space where it won't do any damage, and that sort of allows us to continue growing without, polluting where we live.
Yeah, I think Carl Sagan, I think, said it best when he said, "For the moment, the Earth is where we make our stand," and I think that we need to do everything we can to make sure that the life support systems of Spaceship Earth are functioning properly before we start tampering with life support systems of other bodies in our solar system. So anything that we do, whether for space exploration, should be with a mindset that we need to take care of, planet Earth first and foremost. And we can't. And Elon Musk is not saying this, but there are, we need to get away from any mindset that we're just going to go take over another planet and we'll all be fine, because it's not going to work that way. If we can't terraform our own planet, how are we going to terraform another planet? So, so I think the philosophy should be that we take care of our planet, and the technology that comes from the space program then can be applied to making life better on planet Earth and helping the life support systems here on the planet.
Yeah, it was interesting. Like we just did a video on some of the ideas for trying to keep 1 million people alive on Mars. Like, what is the simulation that it would, what kind of food would work? Is there even enough raw materials? And the reality, of course, is that all of those technologies, the hydroponics, the focusing on LED lighting systems, controlled environments, to produce a lot more food in a smaller area with minimal pollution, makes a ton of sense for here on Earth.
Yep.
And cities that are an enormous number of people compacted in a small area.
Yep.
You could build greenhouses right in the middle of the city that would keep the food close.
Exactly.
Necroticus asks a bit of an odd question, but do you know how microgravity affects sleep apnea? Does the low gravity reduce it or not affect it? So snoring in space.
That's a great question, and I don't know the answer to it. It has to. I can't imagine that it doesn't affect it.
Well, I would think that like you get a lot more fluid buildup in your nasal area, so yeah, you could see it having an impact on it.
Yeah.
But does it just shut you down, so you just snore? So you just breathe through your mouth, or does it like?
Yeah, I don't. That's a great question.
Yeah.
I don't know. I'd like to know the answer though.
Yeah. Well, and part of it, the reason why you don't know the answer is because the space station is actually really loud, isn't it?
Yeah, it's pretty loud. It's a little bit quieter in the sleep quarters, but you have the sounds of fans and pumps and all that stuff going, and yeah, it's not necessarily a quiet place.
Yeah, yeah,
I never heard. I can honestly say I never heard anybody snoring in space.
yeah.
Even on my shuttle missions, where we're all sleeping in the mid deck, or most of us are sleeping on the mid deck, so we're all next to each other. I don't remember hearing snoring.
But are you
I,
maybe just a really deep sleeper?
yeah, I never heard myself snore either.
Yeah, exactly. No one wanted to tell you. Um, Arjona also asks, is getting a cold in space the absolute worst? So did you ever get any kind of cold or anything like that?
Not really. No, I never did. I mean, you feel like you have a cold most of the time because of that fluid shift. So you
Yeah.
feel like you have a little bit of a head cold all the time. But you get, like anything else, you just get used to it.
Did you have any like anecdotes that you want to talk about from the book? Anything that sort of fairly recently that you've been
Yeah, I
have
mean,
incorporated?
I'd be happy to share the philosophy of the book, or not the philosophy, but my strategy in the book. And so, back when I was in my 20s, I had this idea for a novel, and the novel would follow this central character throughout their life, from infancy to old age, to the twilight years. And as that character would mature and their worldview would expand, and they'd see things differently, they'd see a progressively bigger and bigger picture. It would serve as a metaphor for the evolution of society, of civilization. And about 3 or 4 years ago, it dawned on me that my own life is a literary toolbox overflowing with things I can use. Back in my early days in the Air Force, I sat nuclear alert in the Cold War. So strapped to my aircraft was a nuclear weapon that
Really?
potentially I would have to employ. I did fight in combat. I've ejected from an F-16, a split second before I would have been killed. I've lived on the bottom of the ocean. I've lived in space, and through all of these things, it's a really powerful tool to talk about things like tribalism, parochialism, nationalism. I had my own faith journey along the way. So we have these dancing, intersecting orbits of science and religion and spirituality. Um, Obviously, I go into really, really um, great detail, not detail in a technical sense, but in an artistic sense, describing things like the spacewalks and watching a sunrise from orbit. My 3 weeks on the bottom of the ocean was an incredible window into our world. And so the purpose of the book is not only to, from a metaphorical point of view, to say where we've come from an evolutionary point of view, but where we need to go. And I think it's really critically important at this moment in history, because I think we are at an inflection point. I think before us are two paths. And one path is to continue down the two-dimensional us versus them, win at all costs, profit maximization at all costs, mindset, scarcity mindset, which really helped get us to the point that we're at right now. But it's no longer appropriate for as a map for us to follow. The other path is to embrace what I think is going to get us to the point where we can thrive as a species. We can reach equilibrium on our planet, live within the planetary boundaries that we have in peace and in harmony. And that's to shift to more of embracing interdependence, taking a long-term approach to things, profound collaboration, cooperation, openness, transparency, decentralization of power, and a lot of things like that, and information and everything else. And I think, the reason why I was laughing initially when you asked me to talk about my past, and I said I don't know where to start, is I start my autobiographical narrative that is part of this book, The Floating in Darkness, at the first moment of conception. So,
As you remember it.
yeah, I remember it vividly. And so this book is written first person present tense, so it will read like a novel. And it allows me to do things like character development and scene development and everything else as you would have in a novel. And because I can do that, because I'm taking this approach, it really is a very vivid way to be able to bring people along. And again, not just experience it from an intellectual point of view, but an emotional and spiritual point of view.
It's interesting, like, you are a retired astronaut, but like when you think about like 1 week, 10 days on shuttle, 6 months on the space station are fairly small components of a much larger life that has been in service to your country, in service to knowledge, and now in service to a certain extent to kind of all humanity. And it's like the getting a chance to be an astronaut part is almost like the side effect of creating a very meaningful life that is able to provide that level of service. Every time I get a chance to talk to astronauts, it's like it's a no-brainer, that they ended up being an astronaut because they've got all these other excellent attributes. It's got to be kind of amazing to be able to train and work with these people and sort of depend on them for your life, but that you can. Do you find, like that sort of experience? I'd be interested to sort of, what it's like to work with people of that kind of caliber.
I think when you're working with people that exhibit on a day-to-day basis that level of excellence, it brings out the best in you. And so it's always, I really enjoyed working with everybody that I worked with. I really admired the folks, and I think that if you're in a good environment and a good organization, then people are going to bring out the best in each other. And I think you see that in the space program. And I think the reason why you do see that is because the space program is built on a foundation of awe and wonder. And that's the other point that I'm trying to bring out in this book, is that right now, for the most part, our civilization is operating on a foundation of fear, of scarcity and fear. And what that does is it closes our mind up. We put walls around each other. We limit who we will talk to, who we'll engage with. And what that does is it separates us from the very people that have the solutions to our shared problems. When you look at things from a foundation of awe and wonder, it does the exact opposite. It opens the mind. It opens you up to collaboration with people from different, ethnicities and nationalities and religions. And it basically optimizes the problem solving set. And we've got some pretty big problems and challenges that we need to face. And the only way we're going to overcome them is by figuring out how to work together. And the secret sauce, I'm telling you, I've seen this over and over again. I've learned this. The secret sauce is starting from a foundation of awe and wonder. That's what allowed Cold War enemies to help build a space station together. That's what, people who are on opposite sides of the space race, people who fought wars against each other. That was the jump off point that allowed that incredible accomplishment of humanity to take place.
Yeah.
Jump off awe and wonder.
What is the first way? I mean, like if you have a person who is sort of hostile towards you, how do you switch them over to awe and wonder? What's your sort of, what's your jujitsu move to get them into a state of awe and wonder when people are, maybe a little more, they're shooting from the hip and they're in more of a aggro mode?
Yeah, I think the first thing is to listen, because when we close ourselves off, we tend to shut down the things on the side of your head that bring in information. And when people are talking, we're just figuring out what we're going to say next to challenge what they just said. I think what we've done is we've established a society where if somebody has a different opinion than you do, then they're idiots. and people even that have vastly different opinions had that for a reason. And I truly believe, and from the bottom of my heart, that the vast majority of the people in the world, I don't know what, 90%, 99%, I don't know what it is, but the vast majority of the people are good people that want to make a positive impact on the planet, that are open-minded and everything else, but they get steered down the wrong paths. And one of the most powerful forces on the planet is fear. And so there's a lot of people that are using fear to manipulate opinions for their own personal benefit. And there's a lot of people that have been victims of that mindset, have been victims of that manipulation. And So the first step, I think, in communicating with folks who share vastly different opinions of you is to be empathetic and to try and understand where they're coming from, why they're coming from that, where they have that, and to not assume that you have all the answers.
Yeah.
To listen, to actually make sincere questions. Okay, why do you think that's the case?
Yeah.
And guess what? You might find out that you're not exactly right.
Yeah.
You might actually learn something. So
yeah, and it can't hurt. I mean, I think that I've been really tempted to do a sort of a series on my channel where I do sort of just interview people that have dramatically different opinions than I do. Like, and I'm sure some of the kinds of things that we see happening on the internet. And I'm just like, someone who like isn't just being a troll, but someone who genuinely believes something. I would like to just understand, why do you believe what you believe? What is the foundation of your entire thought process, so that maybe I can figure out where is the spot that maybe, you did go down that path. I mean, maybe you're right. Maybe, maybe we didn't land on the moon, maybe, whatever, but maybe you're wrong. And the question is like, what is that first step? And it just for me to identify it, to be able to empathize how people got into that situation. I think it would be tricky, but it's also very fascinating to be able to have that. I'm a real big fan of like the Socratic method, to just ask questions, just keep asking questions until you feel like you completely understand. And you may totally disagree, but at least you can get to the bottom of you. If you can articulate their position as well as they can, at least they feel heard.
Yeah. I mean, if for nothing else, from a curiosity point of view, intellectual curiosity, like flat earthers, right? I'm really curious to know where the edge is and how much the real estate must cost on the edge, because the view must be incredible, right? And so, I mean, I don't mean to be flippant about it, but you get to the point where, I've orbited the Earth, I don't know, 2,800 times or something. And basically, if I get into a conversation with somebody who believes the Earth is flat, their foundational belief is that I'm lying.
Yes.
Right. That I'm making this stuff up.
Yeah.
And that I'm part of some conspiracy.
Yeah.
But even still, I'd like to know where the edge is. I'd like, I'm curious to know how somebody can form that concept.
And why is the assumption that a person who says that they did this thing is lying is more believable, that you're a liar than you're telling the truth? Like, why is that more believable? Why is it more believable that you'd be lying about that thing? So it's very fascinating to me, and it's something that I do want to kind of attempt to just try and have some of these open conversations with people who totally disagree with me. As long as they can, not be mean, I think we can get to the bottom of the conversation.
Yeah.
But
I did something that I'm going to correct right now, because this is part of the problem. I said, if I'm having a conversation with a flat earther.
Yeah.
Right. So you see what I did there?
Yeah. You put them in a box, right?
I labeled somebody.
Yeah.
I put somebody into a category. And I think one of the biggest things that's causing all these problems is we're really quick to label people. Right. And, I think that labels and what we identify, the labels that we identify personally and the labels that we identify other people with are a big part of the problem. And so that was an example of a way not to do it.
Yeah. There you go. I like that, and I'm looking forward to when you do get around to putting your podcast. Some of these concepts, I'm hoping we'll get a chance to come out.
So the podcast that I'm working on right now, I've got three episodes recorded, and it's called Floating in Darkness. It's going to be a podcast that's centered on the book. Again, the purpose of the podcast is to assist the message of the book in creating a movement, creating a community of people who want to make a difference and want to strive towards unity of the species.
Yeah. Let's see. Janelle Duncan is asking, is there an audio version planned?
Of the book?
Yeah.
No, certainly. With Orbital Perspective, I had an audio book. I had an ebook. And then I had an enhanced have an enhanced ebook, and the enhanced ebook has, I don't know, 20 or 30 hours of videos and interviews and everything else. And I imagine that we'll probably do the same thing with Floating in Darkness.
Um, let's see. Got a couple more questions. Nancy asks, if you had not pursued being an astronaut, what career path would you have pursued following your military service? Was it is it an either or? Like once you accept a position from NASA, does that sort of take you out of what you're doing in the military?
Yeah, I stayed in the military for 9 years after I was, so I was a military astronaut for 9 years, and then I transitioned to civil service. But regardless, it takes you out of the normal flow of a military career. There are some astronauts that after they were done being astronauts, they went back to the military and picked up basically where they left off. But it's very difficult to do that because you lost a number of years to do that. So what would I have done after my military career if I was not an astronaut? I'd like to think I'd be doing the same thing. I'd be trying to communicate, messages of unity and collaboration and a bigger picture perspective. Obviously, I wouldn't have the gift, if you will, of seeing with my own eyes the planet from space. But again, the main tenet of the orbital perspective is you don't have to be in orbit to have the orbital perspective. And I'd like to think that I would have had some of that perspective without having gone to space.
The high altitude perspective.
I think that helps. Yeah.
Yeah. So I got one last question I want to hit you with, and then we'll let people figure out how to find out more. So 15 Gamers Haven says, what's the best thing to do to become an astronaut? So if a person is young and being an astronaut is a path they want to go on to, what steps should they take?
Yeah, I think the best advice, and I get asked this a lot, and I really do think this is the best advice I can give, is to find something that you truly, truly love to do and to be the very, very best you can be at it. Because what all astronauts have in common is they've excelled in their chosen field. And we've had astronauts from many, many different walks of life: teachers, chemists, veterinarians, the list goes on and on. So what they all have in common is that they've excelled in their chosen field, but also it also helps to have that be in a technical field, because a lot of the skill set that you need to be an astronaut has a technical aspect to it. So engineering, science, obviously the piloting that we do is also very important. So I think that our space program is hopefully going to become more and more international. Understanding other cultures, being able to speak different languages, I think is also very helpful. And I can't say enough about having a good math background. Math is important. That's what saved Watley on Mars, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I think just that idea of becoming an astronaut is sort of a side effect of leading a meaningful life. The
other thing about doing what you truly love to do is not everybody's going to become an astronaut. There frankly is a great deal of luck involved becoming an astronaut. It's kind of like winning the lottery sometimes, and not everybody wins the lottery. And if you're left with a career that you love, you're doing pretty good. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of people don't do that. They think, okay, I need to check this box to this box to this box to become an astronaut. I don't want to do any of this stuff, but I feel like I need to do that so that I can become an astronaut. They don't become an astronaut, and now they're left with something they don't like doing.
Yeah, exactly. And all right, so I want to again let people know, if these themes are important to you, if this sounds like a story that's going to be fascinating to you, go to, and I'll put a link in the show notes and a bunch of places, but go to Publishizer, so it's like publish and then izer.com. Or IZER if you're an American, / floating dash dot in darkness. But just do a search for Floating in Darkness, and I'm sure you'll be able to find the I guess you don't call it a Kickstarter, a crowdfunding campaign, and you're looking to, and I really like this format that you're looking to raise some money so that you can prove to publishers that there's a market there, and then turn around and shop it around to 161 publishers to see who bites.
Right. So if we hit our targets, the platform pitches it to a number of publishers. The more pre-sales we have, the better luck we'll have with getting the type of publisher that'll get the word out to the greatest extent possible. And you could also find it just going through to my website, rongaran.com. There's a link there for books. Click on Floating on Darkness, and it'll take you there as well.
Fantastic.
And there's a lot of great packages there.
Yeah.
So
there's all kinds
of other than the book that you can get.
Autographed versions, all kinds of stuff. So, well, Ron, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with us today. Really excited to see what happens next. And I really appreciate the message that you're putting out there. I think it's, coming at this time, it's great to hear more voices looking to kind of provide more introspection and sort of awe and wonder. And I think that's it's the perfect time for it.
Thanks, Fraser. And this whole thing, this whole book, it's a collaboration of community. So this is not just me writing a book. It's together, all of us trying to get a message out into the world. So
Perfect. All right. Thanks, Ron. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today, watching. Thanks to the moderators. Thanks to all of the people who asked their questions. I hope I was able to strike the right balance as opposed to hogging Ron's time for the entire episode. I got a chance for a bunch of you to answer questions. No plans for next week, so it'll probably just be a solo QA. So bring your questions for next week. All right, everyone, thanks for joining us, and we will see you all next week. And I'm sure I will cut this off at the wrong point. Let's try now.